So Felly's vocal was cut into a Sony C800, and my vocal was cut into the Shure SM7B, which two totally different microphones, but they both capture a certain grit and they add an amazing texture when mixed together. I think backgrounds are great on an SM7B. So the C800 really suits Felly's voice well. I think it brings out the high ends in her well, and also like doesn't make her low end too rumbly. So right here you've got the rider, which is, as you've seen me on the Apollo Twin, I like to always ride the vocal going in and out just to make sure that we don't get any distortion, that we capture the best vocal possible for different dynamics. So a lot of times when you're getting long takes all the way through, you're going to have very soft, quiet, dynamic vocals, then you have very loud vocals. And between those two, you have to really ride the fader well just so you don't end up getting too much distortion, that you also can hear those lower vocal register parts without losing the detail in the vocal. So that's what this section is used for. So if you're not going to manually ride it, you would just use the plugin to do that. Next one is the compression knob. The compression knob is pretty much just what it sounds like, compression. It's just literally how hard you want to hit the vocal on the way in. Focus knob really controls kind of all the high end of all of my EQs that I have on the vocal. It's kind of just controlling them all at once. So now you have a way of adding just a little more top, a little more presence in the vocal overall. If let's say you have a very distant vocalist, so you could probably jack that up a little higher if you needed that. And then right over here you have the EQ shelf section. So you have it separated by low and high, which is, you know, you want to tilt it up, tilt it down. I have everything automated, so when I move this around, it will just snap back to the where I have it tilted. I like to, depending on who the vocalist is, female vocal, I might want to take some of the highs down, especially on a Sony C800, because I think it's going to make them sound a little too airy and maybe bring out frequencies that you don't want to be a little too harsh. So I have that knocked down a little bit. The low part of the EQ shelf, I would definitely want to turn that down on any type of plosives, anywhere where you're going to get too much body in the vocal, because you're going to really hear that and it's going to sound like you're too close to the mic, like you get that bump into the mic. So I'd like to automate that up and down on sections where the vocalist is very aggressive. I remember when. So in those moments, a lot of times I'm pulling back on volume on those so that you're just not hitting the compression as hard. And then for EQ shelf, like I was just explaining, that's really where you can, when you get to low vocals, you can really kind of dip out a lot of that low end without having to deal with unnecessary artifacts you would get. Next section is the doubler section. So it's spatial widener, which it's great for ad-lib tracks, which I'm using down here on Felly's ad-libs right here. You can hear the doubler in action. So right here. So you can control the stereo and the mix of it. So those are just how wide you want it to be, how narrow. And I think it really helps put the ad-libs in their own ethereal space, so they're not kind of stuck in the way of they're not fighting over the lead's occupancy, and they're not battling with backgrounds, because you have backgrounds panned left and right. So you can kind of put these kind of in the negative space that you're not using. So I like to do that for ad-libs, just to give it, you know, more atmospheric presence. Parts like that. But then once we get to the backgrounds at the end of the song, we're panning stuff left and right. I disable the stereo doubler that. Yeah, I think you're crazy. So see right there, because it's already panning, the stereo doubler is just going to make everything kind of go back to where you had your ad-libs, which you don't want. At the end, you're already relying on panning here, because I have a left and a right down here in the bottom, and then I have two down the middle, so I can get more wideness. So with automation, it allows you to take that doubler off. And last right here is your reverb. So you can choose between room and plate, and it just gives you really cool textures. I can show you both here. So while you have, so that's the plate, and then having the room. So with the room, that gives you much more of just a tighter room, close, bouncing off, nice, reflective, present, but still distant at the same time. It's a great dichotomy of both. For ad-libs, I prefer to use the plate because it gives me a little more distance, but you could use that room vocal, the room reverb on a lead vocal for effect if you want. Then you can just dial that input amount in. The automation part of it is really the most intriguing part of the plugin and the most appealing part, because you can really, as a vocal is going and breathing and moving, you can really capture every element of it. It doesn't matter what the vocalist is doing. There's some type of automation state that you can have that's going to help you achieve that sound to really make the vocal sit silky or be really present and upfront and dry and cut through. So it's pretty much just finding that balance with these modules. And the thing is, there's not so many modules, so it's not too overbearing when you're looking at it and you're overwhelmed by 50 different settings and frequency knobs. And it's pretty much easy to dial in, and it's also very quick. It's reactive. It doesn't take up much CPU power. You can pretty much have a Spirit plug-in on almost every channel, and it just moves so quick, reacts fast. I mean, I really can't think of a better plugin that does this. There wasn't one that existed. So I mean, this is literally the only way that I can get a vocal to sound the way I want it to, with all these parameters happening in real time, and very easy to navigate through. Having all of these settings so readily available makes it so much easier to move fast through a session. You know, as you saw with me and Felly, we were able to just go from track to track, lay doubles down, you know, comp the takes, and not really worry about how did the vocal sound the whole time. Like, we found a nice, happy starting place for her voice, and then we dived into it deeper after, when there were certain parts where I wanted to hone in on. But by having all of these tools at your disposal so quickly, it just allows the session to never lose momentum. So I was really happy with how quickly this allows me to move, because when it comes to creativity, artists don't want to be hampered. They don't want to have a monkey wrench thrown into their creativity. And it's really by having the ability to just immediately make their voice sound the way they want it to right away, dialed in, and not using so much CPU power, you're immediately able to maneuver around, start stacking vocals, keep the creativity flowing. And at the same time, the record already sounds done, as close to where you want it to be before you really start dialing in on some final things. But I feel like there's really no substitute for being able to keep paving the road for that artist, so they don't lose their momentum and want to start again, or they don't question their vocal take. I think a big thing is, if the vocal settings are not right, the artist is going to second guess themselves and think, oh, maybe I could cut that better, or they don't really hear themselves fully. And I think this just allows you to have that already dialed in, and pretty much makes your life 100 times easier from there on out. So right here, using the reverb section, automated, I have all my automation channels here. And on the bottom, you have the reverb mix. And at the end of the chorus, I wanted to add just a little reverb, just to accentuate her riff that she has right before that second verse comes in. So I'll show you what it sounds like.
That's my only advice. Come on now, who do you?
So on that right here.
Come on now.
So we're just automating the reverb built right into the plugin without it. Dry and then wet.
Come on now, who do you?
So that's just one way of using the plugin very quickly, and you have that at your disposal. You don't have to add another reverb plugin in there and waste more CPU space. You already have it built in, so that's really nice. I'm doing a lot of volume automation pans here and there, like for breaths. I like to manually go in and remove a breath.
You really think?
Just so that I like where the compression is sitting, but I don't want the breath to get hit so hard. The beginnings of some of the words.
I think you're crazy.
On the word you can hear a lot of attack on those vocals.
I think you're crazy.
Even on the C on crazy, I could pull down a little bit of the volume on that. So it's going to hit this compression a little softer.
I think you're crazy. I think you're crazy. I think you're crazy.
So that takes a little bit of that dirt out of the cr and crazy. So that way you don't get unnecessary artifacts in the bottom or distortion where you don't want it. Different types of automation. I mean, as you can see here, it's like this is where I had the compression beginning right there. But right now I have everything pretty much at 12 o'clock in the plugin. You don't have to...
I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place.
If you took the compression up, you would hear...
There was something so pleasant about that place.
That you'd see the P's would start getting hit too hard. So that's why where it's sitting now at 12 o'clock feels like a really good place. I messed around with different places to put it, but this one just felt like it was really right where I wanted it to be. The EQ shelf, as you can see, is like a little below the line right here. It's like at minus 3.1 dB, which kind of takes it a little below the horizon, but Felly has a lot of high end in her voice naturally in the way it's captured on the Sony C800. You can hear that.
I remember when I lost my mind.
Here's the EQ high gain automation right here. I could turn this up.
I remember when I lost.
And then you just get a little too airy. And if you take a little too far down,
I remember when I lost my mind.
then it gets a little dull and you lose a little bit of that sparkliness in the voice. So I like to hear, this is how it sounds with just the current state of where the EQ gain is sitting.
I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place. Even your emotions have an echo and so much space.
So right there with space, I could just go and automate a little reverb there to fill out that space and kind of create my own little reverb throw. So I could just go here, and I already have my automation set up over here, so I can just kind of start dialing in on where I want this peak to go.
There's so much space. And when you're out there without care, yeah, I was out of touch.
So that way you can just fill in those spaces very easily. And if you like your automation, you can just copy and paste it, put it over here.
Yeah, I was out of touch.
Maybe pull that down a little in the beginning.
Yeah, I was out of touch. But it was.
Make it go all the way to the butt, right there. And just pull that
I
down.
was out of touch. But it wasn't because I didn't know.
And then I can pull this breath down just a little bit.
But it wasn't because but it wasn't touch. But it wasn't because I didn't know enough. I just knew too much.
Take this breath down a little bit here.
I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly.
And at the end of that, let's add a little reverb automation there. Let's pull it all the way over to where that breath comes in.
And I hope that you are having the time of your life. But think twice. That's my only advice.
So that's my background vocals in there, and I can just kind of turn them up a little bit there and maybe add a little more verb to those. So I can hit the spirit instance that's on the background vocal aux, and then I can add in, see, these are all your automation options here. So on this one, just grab the reverb mix, and on that one, just pull it up for that one section for the word advice. So let's turn that up.
That's my only advice. Come on.
You can even go in and say, okay, hey, maybe I want the EQ shelf to go down on that so it feels a little high passed. So I'm going to mess with that right now, just on the word advice. So just so you can kind of make them feel a little more underwater so they're not in your face.
That's my only advice.
See what it's doing now is dipping down.
Come on now, who do you think you are? Well, ha, bless your soul. You really think you're in control? Well, I think think you're crazy. Yeah, I think you're crazy.
So same thing that we just did with the EQ shelf there. Automate that here as well for these background vocals. So you can take some of the high end out of these, some of Felly's ad-libs here in the end, these background kind of ghostly. There's already so much air in them that we can kind of take a bunch of the air out.
Crazy. Yeah, I think you're crazy. Yeah, I think you're crazy. Yeah, I think you're crazy. Just like me.
Take the breaths out of there.
Yeah, I think you're crazy. Yeah, I think you're crazy. Just like me. Just like me.
We add a little reverb to the end of that riff.
Just like me.
Right there as well, just to kind of give a little distance and body to this last riff. So I'll continue doing this for hours on end until I get everything perfect. But overall, I mean, having this plugin at my dispense now just really gives me such a massive advantage when working with an artist, because there's literally no downtime anymore. You literally just have the sound you want, and it just allows the creative juices to keep flowing, and you can just keep stacking tracks. You're not worried about, oh, I have to freeze this track or bounce that track or commit this. You can keep everything fluid. And I just think it's such a priceless tool. I'd wish I'd had this when I first started making music. It was complicated to even get to this point of figuring out how I wanted vocals to sound, and so much trial and error. I mean, this plugin has been irreplaceable for me, and I hope that it has the same effect on you guys. It's really just changed my workflow so much. And I can't wait for you guys to have a chance to try it.